Hi, everyone. Wanted to send out a dispatch, say hi for the coming week. So I wanted to bring the conclusion, actually, from this book on Auerbach, Speaking and Painting by Catherine Lampert. Um, so I'll just start in. Okay. The book conclusion, the book of life. There's a phrase of Sickert's where he speaks somewhere about something succeeding in that it is like a page torn from the book of life. I'd like what I do not to be art with a capital A, although it may or may not be incorporated into that concept. What I'd like it to be is a page torn from that book of life, even though it's an abstracted image. Auerbach has said he hopes his art will reach the misfit in the back room. And as far as audience goes, in his experience, people who are responsive to painting are a particular set of people who respond to painting. I don't think there's any other classifying equality about them. An extreme example of how Frank's pictures strike unexpected chords happened during the retrospective of his work at the Royal Academy in 2001. Beginning with the opening reception on September 11th. I remember viewers looking at the crusted images of post-war bomb sites, the Camden Town scenes where rough, burnt black girders indicate the hard man-made matter on the streets, the artist's extreme response to painted chimneys, metal gates and tower blocks, and to buildings tapering upwards in window-filled stories. Some were clearly thinking of what had happened to the Twin Towers and their occupants that morning. For visitors over the next 3 months, Auerbach's portraits also spoke to Rembrandt's Women, the other exhibition at the RA's main galleries that autumn. After all, even the title conjures up women who still seem alive, especially Hendrika Stoffel's bathing on a stream wrapped in fur, or perhaps as Bathsheba at her toilet. Frank's pictures of Stella and stretching now for 4 decades of Julia are similarly sensuous, particular to the person and to the fragility of life. A postcard always visible in Frank's studio is of Matisse's head, white and rose, a portrait of his daughter Marguerite. It began, as an ex-radiograph confirms, naturalistically, with her rounded jawlines and the neck ribbon with pendant, though, according to Marguerite, Matisse said during a working session, "This painting wants to take me somewhere else. Do you feel up to it?" Striped bands describe her dress, and a black angular armature is imposed across the face and neck that locks the pink tones of her skin into the whole scheme. The result is nominally geometric with a nod to cubism, yet it is also so dependent on the relationship and ultimately so believable. As Auerbach put it, she looks back at us with a gaze as direct and human as Rembrandt in his self-portraits. Art historians and critics discussing Auerbach's work often exhort their audience not to be parochial and place the artist only in a British context. Michael Kimmelman, reviewing Frank's New York exhibition in 2006, designated Auerbach as one of the best painters around. He described charcoal drawings where the faces made of hooks, crochets, and scrawls were pushed even further than Giacometti's to the edge of coherence while still registering as characters. And he suggested that many of his fellow Americans were natively uneasy with any art that's so frankly self-serious. and indifferent to novelty. I'll skip a section here. Just talking about some other pieces with Jasper Johns. Interesting, but I'll skip forward. Moves into his landscapes. His urban landscapes respond to the undisciplined reality of life in London. But one also senses that the inhabitants, and Frank is one, have become fond of their refuse-strewn pavements and routines. Cumulatively, they constitute a half-century of readings, a kind of weather vane, a suggestion of time travel. In the studio, waving his arm with the gusto of a conductor, he captures on the surface of the painting myriad and precise inflections of this world. The mind taking in the image is entranced, jostled, and buffeted, with the eye alighting on streaks and globules. However, on occasion, this improvisation has resulted in a kind of gaiety and force that comes close to caricature. The stick figures walking around, rings of pigment around the eyes, a reclining head of broken brush strokes. But Auerbach is never trying to mock, nor to persuade the viewer of anything. And such variety and daring makes his work so thrilling to those on the other side of the footlights, and so universal. Lately, Frank has mentioned that Delacroix is present in his mind and has said Picasso is always exhorting me to be naughtier. A reproduction of a head of Dora Maar with a funny headdress is pinned to the wall, not unlike the paintings of her in the 1946 Bar monograph. When I see a Picasso, it feels like an owl blinking, its eyes coming into the light. Time and again, he's made this thing in his imaginative private mind, and there it is, and it's captured the world. That's what people want to see. They don't want to see something they know about already. They don't want to have a program presented to them of something they believe in or approve of. They want this amazing thing they haven't thought of before. Auerbach believes traditional art history misunderstands the way artists think. It is not like the history of science, where after one discovery, previous theories fall away. Rather than think in a linear way, most artists choose what they want to study and steal from. He mentions Picasso returning to African sculpture, El Greco or Ong, and Matisse's interest in Persian or Indian painting. They behave in similar ways. When you read the biographies of painters, you discover what they did was no different to the way painters behave now. When Titian writes to someone to say, "I'm sorry, I haven't finished this," and then spends a further 7 years doing it over and over again until he feels he has got it right, it is very like what I know of painting. In his 70s, Matisse looked back and reminded his interviewer that artists, quote, don't work for fame and glory. They work to express themselves and are aware reputations are in flux. Quote, we've seen people with great qualities remain obscure for a long time. Sometimes they're forgotten for centuries. Look at El Greco. It needed our epoch to bring him out, to extol him. It needed the advent of Cézanne for El Greco to find his place. Frank remembers that Francis Bacon used to say, if you can think things clearly, you can say them clearly. But, he argues, expository language fails to cover the complex way artists orient themselves and offers a better analogy. Ballet dancers think clearly. Carpenters think clearly. They don't think in words. They don't think of saying, they do. They act directly according to their sensations, and there's no interposition of words at all. So it is a wordless zone. In the conversation with Auerbach at Prince's Drawing School in 2007, William Fever asked Frank whether lines of poetry or drama ran through his head. Sometimes, occasionally, in the way that other people use Benzedrine, because I'm excited by it. Recently, I had a really intelligent thought to do with a poem. I just read some of Tony Harrison's, and I was struck by the fact that in one of them, the scansion was incorrect because he had a simple thing to say plainly. And while I was working, I thought that actually the geometry doesn't have to be that coherent. I can break it here because that's what Tony Harrison did with this poem. If the truth is there, the architectural coherence can be broken or shifted. Sometimes the lines go round in my head as I'm painting because they are so exciting. Auerbach used to recite in Kant very long passages of poetry, but now does so less frequently. He knows Keats's odes from studying them for his higher school certificate. I forget things, but I was very affected by verse, and like everybody else I know, I wrote poems, quite a few of them. They are a succinct expression of what is finally an artistic impulse. If you have any of them in your head, you are affected by their purity and force. They do come into my head. I remembered hearing him recite Lapis Lazuli by Yeats. Yes, I absolutely love it, but I didn't think of it for a subject. I knew The Second Coming by heart. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. It is probably not common to everybody, but certainly common to old Cezanne, who knew Latin poetry, which I suspect is the basis of all poetry, and quoted great swaths of Virgil. It is one of the things that painters do. Like a telegram, it is shorthand, just for seeing the secret pattern in life and expressing it with specifics. I love that poem by Thomas Hardy, and he has lists. End quote. This poem, An Ancient to Ancients, carries something of how Auerbach and other artists of similar habits and determination might feel when they reach their 80s. A sense of wanting to justify his existence was there when Auerbach was still a student, and soon was coupled with a desire to leave behind a substantial oeuvre, have exhibitions, and maybe to hand on the torch a bit. Obviously, when I was young, the glamour of it appealed and the hedonism and a bit of fame. But as I have got older, it is just the doing of it that is the fun. And as in the last verse, after the waning of romance and sport, these older men thinking back across the centuries are upbeat, that people will understand what was going on through the artists' minds as they responded to the motifs and their materials, addicted to the best game, painting. There we go, the best game. So I hope you're all well and have a good holiday this week. Find some gratitude within all of it. And keep painting and drawing and making stuff. And that's it. Okay. We'll be in touch. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.